Hey there, and welcome to LearnBytes, the show that delivers bite-sized pieces of wisdom so you can learn how to increase your efficiency and productivity, embrace your natural creativity, and lead with impact. I'm Samantha Garrett from Using Technology Better, and joining me on the show today is Wesa Chau from Cultural Intelligence. Now, Wesa is a thought leader in cultural diversity and leadership. I'm super excited to have her on the show. She's got such an interesting take on leadership. So let's jump in now and start the conversation. Hello, Wesa. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Samantha. Thanks for having me.
You are welcome. Thank you for coming along. So super excited to have you here. And I'm just so intrigued by your, thought leader in cultural diversity and leadership. Like I love that as a sort of like as a title. So you're here to talk about leadership, but I know that you're going to weave some creativity stuff into that too. So I'm excited. But before we jump into that, do you want to share a little bit more about yourself and what this cultural diversity and leadership is all about?
Yeah, so I worked in the multicultural sector for many, many years, won a few awards in that area. And yeah, so I have been working with multicultural sectors and also talking about leadership within that as well. And yeah, so that's kind of my background. So I run my own business, Cultural Intelligence, and I advise people on cultural diversity and how to work with people from diverse backgrounds, and also how to think about leadership from many different cultures' perspective.
Yeah, fascinating. I'm super excited for us to explore that kind of this leadership topic through your cultural lens. So yeah, bring it on. Let's not waste another minute. I want to jump in and hear everything you've got to say. So that's awesome. Thank you. All right. So 4 minutes, 8 questions. I'm going to start the timer. I'll try and give you a 1 minute warning if I look at my phone at the right time. So are you good to go?
Yes.
Brilliant. Let's do it. All righty. First mobile phone and current phone.
My first phone is the Nokia 6210. Yeah. And now I've got a Samsung S20 FE.
An Android girl. I love it.
Android. Yes.
What is the most important quality for every leader to have?
From my perspective, it's probably flexibility, especially when it comes to cultural diversity. Flexibility is one of the key qualities for people who want to work with many different cultures. Interesting.
Okay, we might even jump into that later. I love it. What do you find most rewarding or most challenging about being a leader, Wesa?
Rewarding is the changes that you're able to make. But for me, the most challenging thing is that nobody really fully understands you.
Oh, interesting. Oh, we are so coming back to that. That's fascinating.
Okay.
I'm parking that in my brain. What is the one thing you tell yourself when facing uncertainty?
That there's always light at the end of the tunnel. That when you're in darkness is just the darkness. You just haven't seen the light yet. So around the corner, when you turn that corner, you'll always see that light.
Love it. You just got to keep walking towards the corner and turn it. Beautiful.
Yeah, exactly.
Biggest leadership lesson learned so far?
That if you want to create change, that some people that you thought are allies are not necessarily your allies. The people who thought that aren't your allies could potentially be your allies.
Wow. It sounds like there's a story behind that.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll come back to that.
Full story. Yeah.
If there's one person you could spend an hour with, who would it be and why?
Angela Merkel.
Ooh.
I would love to spend an hour with her. I mean, just watching her in Europe, being able to handle Europe and the rest of the world for like 15 years, I think she's quite amazing.
Yeah, she is. She's an amazing woman. And you're actually not the first person to say that. And I agree. It would be amazing.
Yeah.
Book, let's see what we've got. Oh, minute 44. Heaps of time. Book, video, or podcast you'd recommend to others?
Strategic Intuition. So it's by William Duggan. And so it's really about a book about intuition. And I think it's really important for all leaders, because I think it's really I mean, the key concept there is really about how do you use intuition, and how do you make strategic decisions using intuition. And for me, it's really about embodiment. But then there's a problem with that as well, because when it comes to cultural diversity, if you don't understand the culture, you can't use the intuition because it will be biased.
Oh, yeah.
But then when you do understand it, then you can. So it's actually quite interesting. So it's a bit of, a balance between the two.
Yeah.
But I've always used intuition for me, especially when it comes to multicultural communities. But it's also because I've been in the area, in the sector for about 20 years, so I kind of have an intuitive understanding of it.
Yeah. Wow. Oh my goodness, so much to come to. Okay, we've only got one question left, and we've got lots of time for chat. How will you use your leadership skills to make a difference to the world?
Well, for me, it's really about the cultural diversity aspect, and how do I basically bring that cultural understanding, because obviously we're now living in a globalized world, and also in Australia, we are very multicultural. So how do we bring that cultural understanding into the leadership conversation?
That's the difference you're going to make.
Yeah.
Look at that. And you pretty much came in on time. Brilliant.
Yay!
Woo! The hard part's done now. Now we just get to have a chat. So I'm going to recall the things that I parked. So the one I want to go to first, we talked about flexibility. I want to come to that second. I was so intrigued when you said biggest challenge was not being or not feeling understood. Do you want to tell me more about that?
Well, I guess it's really coming from being a person of color, and also, and a woman as well. And when I became a leader, I was actually quite young at the time. So I was also a young leader. And so during that process, when you are, in many different spaces, you're the only person who's different.
Yeah.
And so whatever I say would be a different perspective from what other people might be used to. Yeah. And sometimes you get blank faces, and you don't quite know whether they just haven't thought about it and they're trying to process, or they're like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Or you can't really read it at all. And so I guess, in my whole journey is really trying to really understand, okay, how do I explain myself so other people would understand it? Because I'm coming from a different perspective. So you can kind of understand it from the perspective of, you were raised differently.
Yeah.
So what's natural to me is not natural to anybody else. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you kind of have to explain the whole process before people would necessarily understand.
Yeah.
So it's probably one of the things that I've had to do in my journey.
And how is that, I'm curious then, how has that experience helped you then understand others or work with others that are diverse from you? Like, has that given you a different, I mean, I'm curious how this links to your intuition as well. Like, has that given you a different sense, or how does those things relate?
Yeah, so now it's actually really interesting you ask that question, because I've noticed that now when I talk to people who are different from me as well, I can hear that they don't understand what I'm asking.
Yeah.
So the response that I get, I'm like, hang on, I don't think they're actually understanding it. So I might have to change my questioning.
Yeah.
Or try and pull out more information from them so I understand what they're saying. So I'm
Gotcha.
Yeah, so I think working in the culture space have helped me understand context very, very well.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, I'm talking to this person was raised in a certain way, and so when I talk to them, I have a really quick understanding of, okay, well, when they're talking about this, it might have a different context.
Gotcha.
And so, I mean, it's actually quite interesting. So even now, like even not talking about culture, talking about like just generally about work context. So one conversation, fascinating conversation I had with a friend, we were talking about the word connecting.
Yep.
Now, in the not-for-profit space, connecting, we think, you know, this is actually quite a deep way of working with each other, because it's about connection, it's about, you know, actually understanding different people. But I was actually talking to a friend who who's a psychologist. For her, it's completely different. Connecting, it's just one touch point.
Yeah, right. So it's just like that. Yeah. Go on.
And so it's like, you know, if you understand the context in where they're from, even just putting culture aside, you then understand, okay, when you say a certain word, it might mean something to one person, it might mean something completely different to another person.
Yet so often I think, like, when we communicate, we make so many assumptions about how that message is going to be interpreted, as you said, based on what we think, right? But we don't take the time to actually explore and, I guess, come up with a shared understanding of what we're talking about and what that thing means.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's
so interesting.
So when we put culture into it, it makes it even more complex. Like even just talking about the word respect, like we talk about that a lot in any leadership conversations, in any communities, right? But then respect can be understood differently. So some people, respect might mean I don't look you in the eye because that means respect. I'm respecting you, so I you know, kind of don't look at you. But then in Australia, if you don't look at people in the eye, people think you're shifty and, you know, trying to hide something.
Exactly. And and I'm just thinking, like, as a woman, like if I probably had a male that didn't look me in the eye, I would probably interpret that like as almost like he doesn't respect me or doesn't value me or like doesn't want to hear, you know what I mean? Like almost the complete opposite. Yeah.
Well, that's exactly right. So it's and there's no right and wrong here. Like it's just how people were raised and what they're used to. And it's not as easy to say, oh, they just need to change, or, you know, we just need to change. It's one of those things, like if you don't feel respected, you don't feel respected. Like there's
true. Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. So does that link, I'm curious then, how does that link to the flexibility piece you mentioned at the start, like the leadership quality around flexibility? Because you just said like it's not just like change. So tell me about the flexibility.
Yeah, and so this is kind of probably one of the greatest things that I have to learn, you know, working with different cultures, is if I know that a person from a certain culture just don't look people in the eye. Yeah. When I see that, I don't make assumptions about they're just disrespectful, to like manage my own feelings. Yeah. And say, okay, well, this person might not understand it. And so like almost like taking my emotions out of it and be flexible in accepting that, well, that person actually don't mean it in that way. Yeah. So I mean that's a very physical example, but there are more subtle ones. You know, it could be the words they use, or, you know, the mannerism in which they talk to you. So it can be a range of things, and also being able to communicate with various different people in different ways. And, you know, even just thinking about, and it's actually really interesting. One of the key ones is also emotional expression. So for me, being a Chinese person, I was actually raised in a culture that don't really show emotions. Right. Interesting. Like, yeah. So when I was young, people can't read me. Like it's poker face, full on.
Which could have had its advantages at some points, I'm sure. But
true. but I had to kind of learn to show it a little bit more.
Yeah.
Because otherwise people think, oh, that person just, they don't seem exciting, so I don't want to talk
or they
to
don't want
them
to
kind of thing.
engage, or like there's a whole lot of things, isn't there? You could totally read into that. Yeah.
And so yeah, learning how to be more expressive. It's easier when I'm around people like yourself
that are like very expressive. Yes.
So it's actually really, so it's actually being different in different context.
Yeah. And that, I mean, that is such an interesting form of flexibility, because, there is such a big focus at the moment, right, on this whole concept of people being authentic and, being yourself and all of that. And while I agree with that, and I think we always bring our authentic self, like I notice even in myself, like you behave differently around different people, because if you do want to connect and actually have a meaningful relationship, sometimes you have to meet people on the level that they're at. So, with you at the moment, you can see me kind of as my normal self, but there are some people where I completely tone down because it's appropriate. And I remember someone else I've interviewed on the podcast, Nick Ginsberg, really early, we've had a conversation about in a different context, and he talks about turning the volume up or down on certain characteristics, right? So even if it's not like you're still not yourself, you would turn the volume up and down on certain parts to then meet what is going to work for that person that you're interacting with at the time. That's kind of just, what's popped into my head as you're explaining that.
Yes. Yeah, well, that's exactly right. And that's, and that's one of the greatest things when it comes to cultural diversity as well. Like there are certain elements that you have to turn up and down depending on who you're talking to. Otherwise, it will be perceived differently. Yeah.
And, I think, how do I say this? We all want to be perceived in a positive, I don't want to use that word, but if we truly want to connect with a person, we want to be able them to receive us in a way that supports that, right? So that's when we do need to necessarily adjust so that we have that great chance of that relationship and that connection, even if it means we've turned the volume down on some part of our personality or up on the other.
And that's why I actually don't like the concept of authenticity in many ways, because only you know whether or not you're authentic, really, when you think about it, right?
That's such a good point. Yeah.
Nobody else can tell. That's why if we look at leaders and say, oh, that leader must be authentic. Well, it's like, how do you know?
I know that. Yeah. That's a great observation. I love that. I think we can end on that. That is so powerful. So let's challenge that rhetoric. I love it, Wesa. You're a champ.
Great.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for sharing such a unique perspective. It's been really great. And before we wrap, I'd love to know where people can find you, connect with you and your work as well, and learn more about this.
Yeah, so I've got my website, cultureintelligence.net.au, and also on LinkedIn, Wesa Chau, also on Instagram and Twitter as well.
Excellent. And you'll send me all those links and we'll pop them all there, but that's awesome. So thank you. Brilliant. Well, you enjoy the rest of the day. And as we are recording this, we are both very close to be coming out of the world's longest lockdown. So we're excited for the end of the week. So next time we chat, we'll be a bit freer. Yeah. Brilliant. All righty. Thanks so much, Wesa. It was a fabulous conversation. I appreciate your time. No worries. See ya. Hey there. I'm back again. I really hope you enjoyed that conversation with Wesa. I loved it, and it's given me so much food for thought. Just really thinking about the people I work with from different cultures and what I can do to actually increase my understanding, which will allow me to connect with them at a deeper level, which at the end of the day, that's what it's all about, right? Being able to connect to each other and work together effectively. So really encourage you to check out Wesa's work. I'll put the links below and reach out to her if you'd like to bring that kind of work and that kind of her expertise to your organisation. So, a couple of little housekeeping bits as always. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you subscribe to the Using Technology Better YouTube channel. Or if you've got me perhaps in your earbuds and you're listening to the podcast, then you can follow the show there too, so you know when the latest episodes are released. And of course, the newsletter. Better not forget the newsletter. A little hello from me in your inbox every fortnight with some efficiency, productivity and organisation tips. So do sign up to that below if you're not already receiving it. But that is it for the show today. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you again soon for another bite-sized piece of the learning adventure that is life. Bye for now.